handout today. So Patty, Pete, and Jim was going to be on on Zoom. I don't know if he's made Jim Bickford. If he's not there, then that's okay. He's there. Okay, thanks, Jim. So for those that are new to the club, Paul Harris recognition acknowledges those individuals who have contributed or who have contributions made in their name of $1,000 to the Rotary Foundation. Rotary established this recognition in 1957 to encourage and show appreciation for substantial contributions that what was then the Foundation's only program. So I'd like to congratulate Patty. If you want to come up, Patty. And Patty is a Paul Harris Fellow +2. Thank you. Pete Trainer. I thought I saw, there's Pete. Pete is a Paul Harris +3. So thank you. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
Nice mask.
And Jim Bickford, who's on the phone. Jim, thank you. Jim is a Paul Harris +2. So thank you, Jim. There's a virtual luncheon. Regina mentioned this last week with RI President Holger Knack, noon to 1 p.m. We talked about trying to do some kind of maybe a watch party on that, but I think with the current situation, that's probably not a good idea. So what I would encourage you to do is I'm going to ask Donna to send this out in the newsletter. Though there's a link on the 5450 district website. It's $28 per person. 25 of that is donated to End Polio campaign. Okay, and you must register no later than Saturday if you want to participate in this. When you register, you can also enter a question that you'd like to ask the RI president. And that starts at noon to 1 p.m. This is November 1st, Sunday. Don't forget, we fall back time-wise, so we're going to standard time Saturday night into Sunday morning. So that is virtual luncheon with RI President Holger Knack. Okay. Any other announcements, anything? Yes. You can pay for it online when you register. Yep. What's that, Linda?
Credit card.
Yeah, credit card primarily. Yep.
The date of the luncheon is Saturday?
November 1st. Right, it's virtual. Virtual luncheon, November 1st. Sign up by Saturday, so the 31st. Yeah. All right. And then we have a guest in the back, Joshua Holtmann. He was here a couple weeks ago. Thanks for being here, Josh. Yeah. Yeah, and he's gonna meet with Patty later. Just get ready. Patty's a grill master, man. She's gonna hammer you. Yeah, she's really effective at that interview. So, all right. So we've got a project announcement with Sebastian and Annie McKean from Jeffco Rotary. They're going to talk a little bit about a project they're working on, and they wanted to share that information with you guys. So Sebastian's on Zoom. I think both Sebastian and Annie are on Zoom.
Yeah. Sebastian, I'm not getting video from you.
Can't see you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can't see you though.
It's like it went excellent. Yeah, I talked to Sam. Sam was on Zoom, but he said it was fantastic. Sheila was there. Sheila, any commentary?
I'm not quite sure why my video is not showing.
It went till 2, I think. Yeah, it went right up till 2. Danielle told me that they actually carried it beyond that into 3 or 4, but that was more like cleanup. Linda said she got an extreme workout. She said it was like CrossFit. So yeah, so it sounded like it went off really well. Sam said it was awesome. I'm glad you brought that up, Paul, because I just thought about something. Hold just a minute. Salvation Army got the green light from Walmart to ring the bell. And then they got the green light yesterday from Kroger King Soopers. So it looks like we're moving forward with ringing the bell this winter, Christmas season. So that's great news. The other piece is that Walmart has also agreed to nationally do a roundup process. So like if you buy something from there, they'll ask if you want to round it up to If it's $19.50, you want to round it up to $20. So that Walmart has agreed to do that with the Salvation Army nationwide. So that's really cool. Yeah, so that's a really neat program. So one of the things we're probably going to change this year is we're probably going to have people buy their own apron versus handing off aprons and cheeks like we've done in the past where we're exchanging aprons. Just from the standpoint of what we're dealing with, it's probably better for somebody to bring their own apron and be safe that way. Again, if you are uncomfortable ringing the bell, hey, that you need to do what you feel is important for you to be safe. So don't feel like there's some serious obligation, but we've always had great support from Rotary. We hope you're able to participate, but if you don't feel like you can, that's okay. All right, David, sorry, we good?
I don't have video from Sebastian. I can hear him.
Okay.
Sebastian, do you want to just call?
Yes.
I have Andy McKean that's asking him to introduce himself if you want.
Okay. Dick, I'll come back to you. Is that okay?
Go ahead, Andy.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Do you want me to speak?
We can hear you. Yep, go ahead.
Okay, well, I met Sebastian a couple of months ago, and I've been sending Project Cure containers. I sent 2 to Kenya a couple of years ago. Earlier this year, I sent 1 to Cameroon. So they knew I was a Peace Corps volunteer for 5 years in Africa when I was younger. So I have a certain love for Africa and the continent. So when Project Cure said, I have this guy, Sebastian, he's trying to raise money to send a Project Cure container to Senegal, to a hospital, I contacted Sebastian, and we've been working now a couple of 2 or 3 months now, I guess, maybe more. I'm losing track of the time. We've raised so far, I think, about $17,000 towards this container. And each container contains about $350,000 to $400,000 worth of donated medical supplies and equipment. Are you all familiar with Project Cure? You are? You know, Doug Jackson is running it now. He used to be the president of the Denver Rotary Club of Denver. So I'm also working with some other Africans, someone from Kenya, someone from Ghana. It's becoming a full-time job, even though I'm a volunteer. But I know from having lived in Africa for 5 years and seeing the lack of resources at these hospitals, and you know, there's doctors that are trained and nurses, but they don't have the equipment and the supplies that they need to really save people and help people, particularly with this COVID situation now. It's even worse. So that's how I got involved. Sebastian, can you put on your PowerPoint?
Okay, actually says the host disabled attendee screen sharing, and for some reason I can't even appear on the camera. I'm not sure. If you can allow me to share my screen, I should be able to do the presentation here. Okay.
Don't you have to make Sebastian the host?
I'm sorry?
Don't you have to make Sebastian the host? So he can share?
Yes, they just have to share with me so I can share my screen here to show the PowerPoint. Okay, can you guys see the slides?
Yes.
I still have a blank screen, so you guys are not seeing me, but I can see you guys for some reason.
Can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, my name is Jean-Sébastien Demi. I'm actually from Senegal, Ziguinchor. And the reason we are here today is to seek funding from your committee to be able to ship this container of medical equipment to Senegal. We have partnered with Project Cure, who have been a tremendous help to us right now, and Andy was very instrumental to help me on this fundraising. We're getting very close now. Altogether, we about 16,000. Our goal is actually getting around 22,000, and then Project Q will chip in and help us get off this container to Senegal. A bit about the place we trying to help here is Hôpital de la Paix, which is actually in Ziguinchor, Senegal, where Alphonse and I are both from. What the story behind this is actually, it happened about a year and a half ago when I went back to visit family and friends in Senegal. So I was ill and ended up at this hospital, and it was kind of like an eye-opener to me right there. Although the staff are very qualified, but the lack of the basic supply and equipment they need to do their work was just mind-boggling to me. So when I got back here in the US, I kind of, well, ironically, I work for UC Health. So I got back here and I was kind of trying to find a way not to really take on this project because it's too big, and it kept haunting me. And then I decided to just charge forward and see what comes up. That's how Sharon in Project Crew have put me in touch with Andy, and then from Andy, things kept rolling on themselves to make this reality, to make this a reality. And the hospital on itself was established back in 1999, serving a population of 662,000 from Ziguinchor, Gambia, another country in the eastern side, and another country, Guinea-Bissau, in the western side. The patient volume on this hospital is averaging around 360 a day, with 172 beds, about 15 doctors and 30 nurses. So the ratio, patient-doctor ratio is just totally offline, as you can see from this data. Our goal is essentially trying to get the life-saving equipment and supplies to the professional of this hospital so they can do their work. And right now with COVID, I'm sure they're just over capacity right now. So our target goal is trying to get this container by first month, the first of the year, January, around there. So from our donation, we're very hopeful that we're getting close to our goal, and this could be happening anytime soon.
Okay, Sebastian, thanks for this information from you and Andrew. We appreciate it. We'll, here at the end, here's a donation. We'll put this in the newsletter, so when you'll see this come out. And
Okay.
I've
So
also
this is the
sent
link.
the link to both Andrew and Sebastian to submit a grant request to the foundation if there's possible. We can review that at a later date. So thanks for sharing this information, guys. We really appreciate it. Okay, we're gonna move into our speaker for the day. I want to thank Craig and Sheila for helping us get this set up. Judge Richard Gabriel is an associate Colorado Supreme Court justice. He was appointed by Governor John Hickenlooper to the Colorado Supreme Court in June of 2015. He's also been a judge for the Colorado Court of Appeals. He's been in private practice as a partner and an associate, both in Denver and in New York. He focused primarily on commercial intellectual property, probate and products liability litigation, all including appeals. He also served as a city prosecutor for Lafayette, as a judicial clerkship, law clerk for the Honorable J. Frederick Mutz, U.S. District Court in District of Maryland, Baltimore. He is from Yale, did his undergrad at Yale, and received his law degree from the University of Pennsylvania. So we'd like to welcome Judge Gabriel.
All right, I'm on the spot. Thank you so much for having me, everyone. It's a delight to be here. So again, I'm Rich Gabriel. Wait, I'm taller than these guys. I'm sorry. It really is my delight to be here. I'm with a group called Our Courts Colorado. I'm actually the chair of the executive committee of that group. We're a joint activity of the Colorado Bar Association and a group called the Colorado Judicial Institute, which is a nonprofit that serves to enhance, promote the excellence and fairness and impartiality of our court system. Our courts was founded in 2007. I lost track of my years. With a sole mission of providing nonpartisan information to adult folks. Rotary clubs like this really got us our start. In our 13 years, we started with one presentation. Normally I would do a PowerPoint presentation for you, but in the interest of time, I figured I'm just going to talk for a few minutes and then have a dialogue with you all. We started with one PowerPoint presentation about our state courts, how we select and retain judges. Today, after 13 years, we have 14 different PowerPoint presentations, 4 of which are translated into Spanish, being presented by Spanish-speaking lawyers and judges to Spanish-speaking audiences. We've presented over 600 times to over 20,000 people and won a whole bunch of really big national awards, including this year, the National Center for State Courts gave us the Sandra Day O'Connor Award for Civics Education. So that's just a background on who we are. As a judge, I can't ethically take political positions. We saw an educational opportunity to get out and just talk to folks and say, we're not here to sell anything. We're not here to take a position. We're just here to provide information. And what Craig and I talked about, what I might talk about in the short amount of time today, you might have heard there's an election next week. And perhaps you've looked at, and this is the Rotary Club, you guys all probably have voted already, but in case you haven't, if you've looked at the ballot or your blue book, you see a whole bunch of judges listed on there. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I would anticipate that many folks, probably even in this room, leave a fair number of them blank. When I stood for retention a couple of times. The first time I stood for retention, lawyer friends of mine came up to me and said, hey, I saw you on the ballot. I always leave the judges blank, but I voted for you. Or I saw you on the ballot. I vote no on all the judges, but I voted for you. We have an incredible opportunity in this state to have a say in selecting and retaining the judges that we have, to make sure our judges are fair and impartial and provide equal justice under the law. We are not doing ourselves any service if we leave all those judges blank. And so really what my hope today is to talk at you maybe 10 or 15 minutes and then open up for any questions you want to ask me about anything. I believe in transparency. I think our judges need to get out of our chambers more so they can see we're human beings. We do make mistakes, and welcome a dialogue. I'd much rather have a dialogue in our short time than my lecturing at you. So I'm going to give you just a little bit of information as background, and then I'm game for any kind of questions. Colorado has what we call a merit selection system for picking our judges. We are one of a minority of states, only about 21 states pick judges in the way we do. The majority of states elect judges in a political election. You run to be a judge as a Democrat or as a Republican with all that entails. Campaign commercials, raising money. I mean, and I've seen a presentation from the former Chief Justice of the state of Texas who was elected to that position. He shows campaign commercials from around the country. Imagine the person running to be a trial court judge who's running ads, I am going to be tough on criminal defendants. And then he or she gets elected, and then you're a criminal defendant in his or her courtroom. Maybe you're not feeling so good. Or a dear friend of mine actually just told me a story last week. She was trying a case in another state that elects judges. Her opponent had hosted a fundraiser for the judge, the trial judge, the week before. Maybe you don't feel very good. Well, in Colorado in 1966, we said we don't want that. We want our judges out of politics. And so we developed a system called merit selection. I could spend a long time talking about this to you, but I'll keep it really short. The way it basically works is if there's a vacancy on a court, an announcement goes out statewide. You can apply. So in my case, in 2015, when I applied to the Supreme Court, Justice Greg Hobbs retired, and so a vacancy is announced. We actually have a vacancy announced now. Our Chief Justice retires in January because he turns 72 and we have a mandatory retirement age. So we're in the process I'm about to describe right now. You're going to file an application. Basically, the criteria, you have to be a lawyer for at least 5 years and you have to live in the state, at least when you get sworn in. Obviously, folks who apply to the Supreme Court have been around and practicing a lot longer. I filed a very long application, about 70 pages long, and I can give you all the detail about that. It goes to a nonpartisan nominating commission. The nominating commission, 15 people, 8 non-lawyers, 7 lawyers. The governor appoints the non-lawyers. The Chief Justice, the governor, and the Attorney General work together and appoint the lawyers. And no political party can have more than 8. In other words, no party can have a majority of more than 1. And the reality is they're pretty even because you got Republicans, Democrats, and independents are unaffiliated. So long application goes to the nominating commission. 35 people applied when I applied for my current position. They got together to decide who they wanted to interview. They decided to interview 17, and then they did all kinds of due diligence. They called the references on my application. I had a list of cases I was involved in with the names of the other parties and their name, phone number, and address. The nominating commissions actually call. They say, is he a good lawyer? Does he have integrity? Does he have a good temperament? All that kind of information. They have an interview, kind of intimidating. You sit in a big conference room. I'm at one end, the 15 commissioners around the table, and the Chief Justice is across from me. And they ask questions. Ultimately, they decide usually three names to be sent to the governor as finalists. And that process, from the time the vacancy is announced to the time they send the list to the governor, by law, takes 30 days. You may all remember in 2016, and what I'm about to say, I do not mean as a political statement, just factual. President Obama appointed a man named Judge Merrick Garland to the US Supreme Court, and he never had a hearing for about a year, just never had a hearing. And then President Trump got elected, and that was the end of Merrick Garland's nomination. We can't have that in Colorado, 30 days. Then the governor gets the list, and then the governor has 15 days to appoint one of those people from the list. He must appoint from the list, and if he doesn't do it in 15 days, the Chief Justice appoints from the list. And one thing you didn't hear me say is anything about politics. You don't list on your application any political party, nobody asks, nobody cares. And I'd say in that 15 days, the governor does a bunch of due diligence, but I don't want to take the time to share all of that. But the governor does outreach, the governor has an interview. I actually had 2 rounds of interviews in the governor's office, then the governor appoints. So then the next question, so congratulations, you're now appointed to the Supreme Court. Am I appointed for life? And this is going to bring me to all those judges you see on your ballots today. No, we in Colorado are not appointed for life. Federal judges are. Or our Constitution, Article 3 says a term of good behavior. So they serve until they're impeached or they retire or they die. We are not appointed that way. We are appointed for a provisional term first of 2 years. So every judge who gets appointed has to stand for retention after 2 years of service. We do retention elections in every other year in even numbered years. So we're at 2020, and the next time you'll see judges on the ballot are 2022. If you're appointed in December of this year, you're probably not going to stand for retention for 4 years, almost 4 years. It's the next retention election after you have been on the bench 2 full years. So that's kind of how that works. Every judge has to do that, state court judge. And if you are retained, you stand for retention periodically. The county courts stand for retention every 4 years, district courts every 6, court of appeals every 8, and the Supreme Court every 10. Why is that? I've never heard a really great answer to it. That's just what's in the law. I suspect what it has to do with is the higher you go, the more stability we want. We don't want turnover in the Supreme Court so frequently. We're more willing to tolerate turnover in the more local levels more frequently. But I don't know if that's true, but I've heard that. So we have to stand for retention. And then the voters get to decide if you keep your job. So how do you do that? where can you all find information so that you can vote in an educated way? And I'll say to you, if you hear one message from me today, it would be please educate yourselves, please vote in an educated way. If you want to vote no on all the judges, that's fine, but educate yourself and vote for a reason, and then help your friends figure out where they can find this information. So where can you find information? Let me tell you how the process works. And again, I'm going to keep this brief because I want to have some dialogue with you. The year you're up for attention, there is an Office of Judicial Performance Evaluation, and we have performance commissions, judicial performance commissions in every local jurisdiction and one for the statewide, for the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court. The year you're up for attention, you get a call in January. Are you likely to stand for attention? Yes, I am. Fill out a long self-evaluation that goes to this performance commission. The performance commissions, by the way, are also nonpartisan, and they are appointed by the governor, the chief justice, the speaker of the House, the minority leader of the House, the speaker of the Senate, and the minority leader of the Senate. All branches of government have a say in selecting these performance commissions. And where I'm going with this is they ultimately give you a report card, which is what you see in the blue books that you have. When you turn to the back and you see all the judges, the process that I'm going to describe is how you get to that blue book little report card. So I had to fill out a self-evaluation, fairly lengthy, substantive. What did you learn in your last term? What areas of law are you working on? How do you work with your colleagues? How do you work with your law clerks? Tell us about your process for deciding a case. Substantive. They actually used to ask you to grade yourself. You have to give yourself an A, B, C, D, or F. This was a no-win proposition. A colleague of mine, dear friend of mine, he was up for retention. He was told, give yourself all A's. So he did, and then he was criticized for being arrogant. 2 years later, one of his colleagues, our colleagues, kind of learned a lesson, so mixed in A's and some B's, and then he was criticized. I guess you're not too thrilled with your own performance. You gave yourself B's. Fortunately, they got rid of this grading system, and now it's substantive. So these performance commissions get my self-evaluation. Then they also survey people. They survey lawyers who appear in front of you. They survey the parties. Jurors get surveys. My chief justice gets interviewed. Every judge in the state gets to review me since I'm on the Supreme Court. Surveys go out far and wide. And in my court, every party who has appeared in front of the Supreme Court gets a survey. And they fill out these surveys. It's self-selecting, to be sure. There's a private survey company that really tries to get people to respond. It won't surprise you to know, given that it's self-selecting, it's hard to get people to respond to these surveys. Maybe about 30% respond. Very high rate of response from the judges, but lawyers and parties, not so great. Anyway, they get these survey responses and they collect those. And in the surveys, the folks filling out do give me a grade. Knowledge of the law, A, B, C, D, or F. Courtesy, judicial temperament, they grade you on all these. Timeliness of getting out decisions, and they give you a grade. And you get, I hate to use the phrase, but kind of like a GPA, you get, a 3.5 or 3.6. And that information will be available to you, and I'll tell you how in a second. And a report is prepared with all these survey responses. What is publicly available are the numbers, the grading numbers. The judges actually also will see comments that people can write anonymously on the surveys. Again, recognize 50% of the people who leave my courtroom leave unhappy because 50% win and 50% lose. And some of these comments can be fairly harsh, I'll say that. What I looked for when I saw the surveys were themes. What are the things people are repeating? In my case, I was pleased to see nice, Justice Gabriel's always courteous. Justice Gabriel is prepared. His written work is clear. I was looking for themes. And then you get the outliers. My favorite one was Judge Gabriel has more in common with prisoners in the jails than other judges on the bench. Now, I actually don't know exactly what that means, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't good. And the commissions weigh that, and they get there. There'll be your share of disgruntled litigants who are filling these out too. So these commissions get my self-evaluation. They get these survey reports. They actually interview my chief judge. They interview the district attorney if I was a trial judge and the public defender. Then they do an interview of me. And they are required to come watch me in the courtroom. And after they have all this interview, they actually write a report, a kind of summary report, sort of a report card. That is what appears in your blue book. And so, as I hope you can see, there's a lengthy process that goes into what gets you to the blue book and those reports on the judges. Now, I don't want to be heard to say the system is perfect. It's not perfect. We're human beings that are doing this. We all have implicit biases. We know that. But the system tends to work reasonably well. And the judge is then shown a copy of the report before the judge has to make a decision to stand for retention or not. So the judge may get a bad evaluation and choose not to stand for retention. And I share that with you just to kind of say, we do sometimes hear criticism of our system. And you hear things like, no, it doesn't work. No judge ever gets kicked out of office. No judge ever gets a bad evaluation. That actually is factually false. 2 years ago, 2 judges received negative evaluations, one in Arapahoe County and one in El Paso County. Both were voted out of office. This year, there are 2 judges statewide who have received negative evaluations, one in Adams County and one is in a rural county. And I'm sorry, I'm not remembering which county it is. The judge is given a chance to review that and decide to stand for retention. If the judge decides to stand for retention, the judge is given the opportunity to respond in the blue book. So if those of you, there's no one from Arapahoe County this year, but if you remember last year, the judge did respond. He wrote a little paragraph responding to the negative evaluation. So the judge can do that. The other thing I was going to say, again, we hear this criticism about it doesn't work. It's just not true to say no one doesn't get retained. And you would think if our merit selection system works, we shouldn't see that many judges have a problem. If we pick good judges at the front end, and I would say the same on the federal side, in the history of this country, 14 judges have been impeached in the entire history of the country. That's pretty good. You wouldn't expect to see many if you have selected good judges. So it is just a myth to say no judge ever gets kicked out of office. And the other thing I mentioned, the judge could choose to choose not to stand for retention if get a bad review. That skews the numbers. So it may be more than 2 or 3 a year. Some judges got bad reviews and chose not to stand for retention. So that's the process. Then you stand for retention and the blue book goes out. The last thing I want to say, and then I'm going to open it up for questions in about the 12, 13 minutes we have, is that a judge is not allowed to campaign. We don't want our judges in politics. So no yard signs for me, no retain Justice Gabriel. It's not a contested election, as you see on your ballots. It just says, should Justice Richard L. Gabriel be retained, yes or no? No campaigning allowed. There's one minor exception. If there was an organized campaign against me, I could respond. 2 years ago, there was a campaign that a lawyer was running against an Adams County district judge. TV commercials, fairly abusive TV commercials. The lawyer spent a lot of money. The judge chose not to respond. Most judges choose not to respond to that kind of thing and was retained, end of story. But you are allowed to respond. Again, most judges choose not to do that publicly. They tend to respond in the blue book if they're going to stand for retention and got a bad evaluation. Last point that I'm going to make is that you may find interesting, what gets judges in trouble? It tends not to be a lack of knowledge of the law or anything like that. The biggest problem that judges have is judicial temperament. Arrogant, condescending, that kind of thing is what gets judges in trouble quicker than anything else. No disrespect, Judge Judy probably would not survive a retention election in Colorado. That kind of temperament and yelling at parties doesn't look so good to folks. So I know I just threw, I'm sorry, I intended to tell you where you can find this information. But if you look at nothing else, read the blue book, take it for what it is, but read it. And I've shared with you all the information that went into it. The self-evaluation form, the performance surveys, the interview with me, the personal observation in my courtroom. And you can also look at that full survey. So if nothing else, look at the blue book. If you want to look at the full surveys, which could be 30 pages long, you can find that. It's at the Office of Judicial Performance Evaluation website, ojpe.org. That's Office of Judicial Performance Evaluation.org, ojpe.org. If you put performance evaluation, it'd probably come up also. You can find that information and look at all the grading. It breaks it down by how non-lawyers voted on the lawyers, like jurors, how the lawyers voted on the judges, how other judges rated the judges. So you can see all this information broken down into categories like timeliness of opinions, knowledge of the law, judicial temperament, and the like. So ojpe.org, you may want to take a look at it just for grins, just to kind of see how much information is there. Again, is it perfect? No, but it tends to work pretty well. And I would say, I mentioned the survey responses. Sometimes there's a problem with the judge did not get many survey responses. That will tend to skew the numbers. 10 people responded and 3 people said bad things. Their grade point average is going to go down. The Performance Commission will actually say that in the Blue Book. The response rate was very low and may have affected these numbers or something like that. So I threw a whole bunch of information at you fast because time is so limited. I am happy to answer any questions about what I just shared, or if you have, I love being transparent. I love pulling the curtain back and, telling people what happens in my court or the courts generally. I'm game for any kind of questions you want to ask me about anything. So fire away. Yes, sir.
When you're reading the Blue Book, some of the judges will say unanimous in the commission, and others will say 9 out of 11. Where is the break point on the bias on the surveys? Should I get to where I don't want to retain somebody if it's like 7 out of 11, or do I kind of go lower? What's the number?
Yeah, so I'll repeat that for the folks on the screen who are watching us, and hello to all of you. In the Blue Book, it actually, the report in there is, what's in there is required by statute. They have to tell you what their vote was, and now they say meets performance standards or does not meet performance standards, and those standards come from the statute. They have to give the breakdown of the vote. The local commissions have 10 people on it, the state commission have 11. So it will say the commission votes 7-3, or 10-0 that the person meets performance standards. The other things in the report, by the way, are the methodology used and then why they made their recommendation. So the gentleman was asking me, is there a break point when you should vote to retain or not to retain? And I'll say personal choice. For you, if the commission splits 5-5, it would say we have no recommendation because by an evenly divided commission. And that happened 2 years ago to a judge. You may look at it, and I don't mean to be suggesting there's a right answer here. It's up to you. Everybody in this court got a 10-0 retention vote, and this one judge got a 7-3 vote. That makes me uncomfortable. If I want to see people with a unanimous, comment on meets performance standard. It's really a personal choice. The only legal breakdown is that a majority of the commission has to vote one way or the other. And a 5-5 vote, they'll just make no recommendation. If I've answered your question. I don't mean to be ducking it, but it really is a personal choice. Yes, sir.
So, all right, so let's just pretend that 3 people get voted out in this election. So is there like this, like a universe of potential judges that are future judges that then the governor chooses? Go through that process that you were just talking about.
Correct. So the question was, if say a number of people get voted out of office this time, kind of essentially what happens next? Is there a universe of people to stand? What would happen is a vacancy would get announced. So 2 years ago, 2 judges were voted out, and the vacancy got announced just like it was announced when Justice Hobbs retired for me. It will say there are vacancies on these courts because of the judges lost their retention election. Here's where you can find an application to apply, and then this 45-day process of filling that spot takes over. What happens? You bet. Yes, sir.
Judges are not recommended in the Blue Book, how many are voted out? Or what percentage are?
Yeah, good. That's an excellent question. The gentleman asked if there is a non-retention recommendation. Well, let me clarify. And I say this, the commission used to write in the Blue Book, recommend to retain or not retain. The statute was amended 2 years ago to change it to meets performance standards or does not. And I think that the idea was they didn't want to feel like too much of a heavy hand on the voter. It sounded like we vote to not retain someone, that should carry weight. So it now says meets or does not meet. If a voter gets a negative evaluation, the question was, are there statistics for how many actually don't get retained based on a negative evaluation? I have not seen those statistics. Anecdotally, I can tell you it's more than 50% of the time the judge gets not retained if they have a negative evaluation. But sometimes they're retained, and sometimes the judge may get a positive evaluation and not be retained. And I'll tell you one example of that here just in a second. So I wouldn't tell you it's 100% of the time the judge is voted out based on the negative evaluation, but I would venture to say more than half of the time. But every time you do see a dip in the percentages, the retention vote. This was kind of relating to the comment I made at the beginning. About 25 to 30% vote no on every judge every time. You rarely see a judge getting a retention vote of more than 80%. That's just the way it goes. But you will see a dip in those numbers for someone who had a negative evaluation, even if they're retained. About 10 years ago, there was a campaign against 3 of the justices on my court. There was a group called Clear the Bench were campaigning. All 3 justices were retained, but their retention votes, which would normally be like 75 or 80%, were like 59 or 60%. So people were paying attention. And every time there's a negative evaluation, you see that kind of dip. 4 years ago, there were 2 judges in Larimer County who both were recommended unanimously to be retained. But they actually were prosecutors before they became judges in the Timothy Masters case, which is kind of a guy who was convicted of murder and then turned out being exonerated. These judges, when they were lawyers, were actually charged with an ethical violation for not turning over certain evidence. And it was a public censure. They weren't fined or disbarred or anything, but now they're judges, and here's an ethical violation. The county got sued for the guy who was wrongfully imprisoned and settled it for like $10 million. The public didn't like that. And they said, if these 2 judges were not ethical as lawyers and they cost the county $10 million, we don't want them as judges. There was an active campaign to remove them, and they were removed from office, even though they got unanimous retention votes, retention recommendations. So that happens too. So there's no statistics that I've seen, but the Blue Book does have an effect. So you at least see some people are reading it, but you do see that 25 or 30% vote no every time. So, yes, sir. Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have asked if there are questions on the screen.
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. I don't have a question. I have more of an observation. I served on the Judicial Performance Commission for the 16th Judicial District several years ago. As a lawyer member. We did a lot of work on this. I was really impressed by the way that this was all done by both lawyers and non-lawyer participants. And so I just wanted to give a thumbs up for that system of retaining judges. And from my personal experience, it's a lot of work. People put a lot of effort into that. And I wrote some of those Blue Book recommendations. So I know how that works, and I know I have more confidence in that kind of performance evaluation than any of these election provisions you've seen in many other states. And I think most states are pretty jealous of the way that Colorado does their appointments of judicial officers.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and thank you for your service. I will tell you, I have gotten to see the work of these commissions and the nominating commissions. My colleagues and I get to serve as ex officio chairs of the nominating commission. So we don't vote, but we run the meetings, and we see them deliberate in which names they're going to send to the governor. These folks work really hard. They really study applications. They do their diligence, and it is comforting to see them when they deliberate about the names. They are talking about the merits, not about all the side noise and the politics. This would be a good judge. He or she will hit the ground running. I love the experience. They actually will talk about diversity issues. Are we really going to send 3 prosecutors or 3 public defenders to the governor? Maybe we need to kind of have more diversity in that. Or are we really going to send 3 white men to the governor? I do believe in diversity on the bench. I think our courts serve the public best when we look like the public. If you are a diverse party in a case and you show up and there's a bunch of 7 old white men like me, maybe you don't feel like the court is going to understand. where you're coming from. And so I can talk about that too. We've worked very hard to improve diversity, and some of it is pipeline, getting folks to apply. And so we hired a diversity outreach coordinator for the state court system who's traveling the state. She's magnificent, a lady named Sumi Lee, who's trying to develop the pipeline. We have recruited folks. I hold myself as a resource for anyone who wants to apply to the bench. We do mock interviews for them. We help talk about their applications just to help. And we're making some progress. If you looked at the state court rolls in the end of last year, November of 19, you would have seen one African-American district judge in the entire state of Colorado. This governor has appointed 5 African-American women to the bench this year. Heard the message, and they're all highly, highly qualified. And so I think we're making progress. We have some ways to go, but I think we do ourselves well when the bench looks like the public that we serve. Yes, sir.
Comment on that kind of subject. We're all humans. We all have different views and so forth. Can you comment on the general bias of a judge? How you think that might sway his decision?
Yeah, thank you for the question. The question was, can I comment on the bias of a judge and how it might sway his or her position? So we're all human. Judges are human. We come to the table with implicit biases. One of the questions that almost is frequently asked in the nominating commission process is, what are your implicit biases and how do you account for it? You have to be aware of that. And so I would say the judges I know really work hard to face that and to deal with it. And I think we do a pretty good job about it. Now in my court, there are 7 of us. So if I'm, have a bias and kind of it's coming out, I got 6 colleagues who will call BS on me and say, wait a minute. And I think that helps. Now, when you're a trial judge and you're the lone wolf, do you have some biases? I suppose the jurors are a check at some level on what the judge might do. But the simple answer is we're all human. We do get questions and we are asked to confront our biases in the nominating process. That's something that the commissioners look for. Is there a sense, you can tell, let me, an example, and you see this probably the most with the folks who are applying from the public defender's office or the DA's office. Is this going to be a prosecutor in a robe or a criminal defense lawyer in a robe? And the commissioners may ask that question. I've seen it asked, I may have asked it. Okay, you've been a prosecutor your whole career. How would you make it clear to everyone that you can be fair and impartial to the other side in a criminal case? And they will have thought through that and given good answers. Sometimes, the folks will come and they are dyed-in-the-wool defense lawyer or dyed-in-the-wool prosecutor, and it's obvious. And the commissioners will talk about that. This guy, can't see the other side. That's a problem. So we have to confront the biases that we have and recognize them and recognize we have them. Some people don't do well in an interview when they get asked about implicit bias and they can't come up with any or deny that they have them. So that's probably not the greatest answer that I could give you, but all I can say is we're asked to recognize those biases. The commissioners are trained on implicit bias and to look for those issues. And we have a duty to recuse ourselves from the case if there's even an appearance that we cannot be impartial. If my impartiality can reasonably be questioned, I have to step off of the case. And I think we take that very seriously. I'm pleased to say, because of the system that we have, that the politics are not in it. I think our courts generally are viewed in relatively high regard. There are always going to be exceptions. I have to be a little bit careful here, but I worry about the federal system and where we are now and the politicization of the selection at the federal level. And again, people are going to be who they are. I worry about the implications of that process on the courts themselves. A lot of people, I think, have looked at, we have a brand new U.S. Supreme Court Justice, Amy Coney Barrett, who by all accounts is brilliant. There are people who look with suspicion on her appointment because of the politics in it. That is not good. And I hope at some point the folks involved in picking our judges at the federal level will recognize that the way they conduct themselves in the process has consequences. It wasn't that long ago when Justice John Paul Stevens got a 96-0 vote when he was up. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I think her vote was something like 94-3. And Orrin Hatch, a Republican senator, was her strongest advocate. I hope at some point we kind of get through all the political noise and just focus on merit. That's what we've tried to do in Colorado. Not perfect, but with some success. I hope I answered your question. Try not to duck it. So just my thanks for having me. Thanks, Phil, for having me, and thanks for everybody online for paying attention. Craig has my email address. If you have questions, get my email address from Craig and contact me anytime. I wish you all stay healthy, stay well, and invite me back soon.
Great. Hey, Judge Gabriel, this is a challenge coin that we give everybody that comes in, and we appreciate you coming in and being part of this.
Thank
Thanks
you so much.
All right, everybody. Dick, did you have one question real quick? You know, it varies anywhere between 5 and 10. Does that sound about right, David? Okay.
How many people are
On Zoom, yeah. Yeah, it's about 5 to 10. You know, when we were doing it full time, obviously we had close to 30, but yeah, it's 5 to 10 right now. All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. We're adjourned.
See you, everybody. See you next week.